This is an interview for people we here at RPM Newcastle. We're joined with Giovanni Spatuzzi, Mr. Sayers, and Alex Johnson. I'm going to ask them a couple of questions about the forthcoming night event. And the first question is, what is Byker Groove and how did it start? That question's to anybody.
Initially, it was just me and my friend Carolyn DJing at the Tanners. We did about 4 or 5 different nights in 2003, different dates, sorry. And Daz at the Tanners asked us to do a monthly thing, and we did a monthly thing. At which point, I got on the internet. A bit late, but I got on the internet and I was involved in forums. And there was a forum called Vinyl Vulture, and there was sort of a template for it from a night in London called Brillo, and it was kind of an open deck sort of thing, just for people from the forum to get involved. Eclectic music. I mean, there was no strict rules because it sounded a bit snobbish, but there was, you know, you weren't playing comps and you weren't largely playing reissues. You're playing whatever music you wanted, really. And they did some meets, and we organised one. Me, David Connolly, and Neil Sudders. My friend Tony, who sadly passed away, and so we got together. Then we needed to do a poster, and we hadn't come up with the name. And one of the gentlemen from London, Matt Hero, he came up with the name Byker Groove.
What is the concept behind Byker Groove?
Well, the forthcoming Byker Groove were very kindly asked by the Star and Shadow Cinema to put a Byker Groove on. And I'm conscious the previous Byker Grooves at the Tanners, it kind of ran from sort of 6 o'clock till 11 o'clock at night. And I just thought, what with having attended a number of electronic music nights at the Star and Shadow that have been put on by the cinema, and also another techno night called Municipal, I just thought, actually, how can we do something a little bit differently? How can we do a night that's kind of a club night that focuses on playing soul, funk, psych and disco? So basically, Craig and I approached the Star and Shadow Cinema, went and met with the committee, and just proposed doing a night called Byker Groove, of which most of the committee laughed at, on like a bank holiday Sunday. So we managed to secure the date of Sunday the 26th of May, and also put in for a late licence from Newcastle City Council. And at the time I was reading a book, or I was rereading rather, a book by Tim Lawrence called Love Saves the Day, which focuses on sort of disco New York and clubs such as the Loft, the Sanctuary, the Paradise Garage. And I was quite influenced by it, and I just thought, how can we do something kind of in that sort of nature, being influenced by those nights and playing sort of similar sort of style of music, sort of from the early 70s to sort of late 70s, early 80s. And that's basically the concept behind the forthcoming event. Ultimately, it's a not-for-profit event. All proceeds after costs go to the Star and Shadow, and the whole focus is really just to get people there, positive, inclusive environment, playing great music, some of which they may have heard before, some of which they may not have. Just people dancing, enjoying, having a good time. That's basically the concept behind it.
How does everyone complement each other within Byker Groove on the night?
Well, I mean, when Craig and I were developing Byker Groove at the Star and Shadow, I was saying to Craig, I said, how can we make this more collective? How can we involve some of the younger DJs in Newcastle that are playing fantastic records? So immediately I thought, well, obviously Alex Johnson, who I've played with at the Sage on New Year's Eve for the last 3 New Year's Eves. and also other people such as Adam, who runs Cosmifrica, and also Jelly, who runs Funky Fridays at Ernest. So just from going along, listening to the music that everyone was playing, I just felt it was a real sort of, it was a really good group of people to basically involve in Byker Groove. Everyone has a sort of a different style, but it all complements one another. But in the same respect, at Byker Groove, what you can expect to hear is basically a constant change in the record, but a constant flow and a constant sort of evolution of the type of music that's going to be played.
But each individual involved there has got kind of their own identity, their own sound. For all
Definitely.
it would flow, it sit quite nicely, which is a bit more focused version of what we were trying to do at the Tanners, you know what I mean?
It is, yeah. Because personally, there's nothing worse than going to a night and it's kind of, you go to a night for a couple of hours and it's just the same music or the same genre of music, and it's really quite, flat, doesn't kind of go anywhere. Yeah. So with Byker Groove, what we want to create is basically a night where, it's constantly changing, it's constantly taking people in different directions, but kind of like any sort of good mix, it's taking people on a journey. That they can sort of engage with and dance to and just have a fantastic time.
Yeah. But some of it's like, say you went to Northern Do, you've travelled to Glasgow, G. It's kind of like the back room meets the main room as well, isn't it? You know what I mean? Because if you have, I've never really been to many of these things. I went to one at Gateshead, and if I was going to be really harsh, I'd just say, it was like one fast Northern track after another fast, and there was no distinction between that, and that's all you had.
Absolutely.
You had, and in their own right, any one of them individual tracks could be killer, could be expensive, could be whatever you want. Mm-hmm. It was just that. It was just that. There was no scope, there was no broader context, and it was a very blinkered vision of whatever that genre would be. Mm-hmm. Where like, I kind of find genres more interesting where they bleed into another genre, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Not that I don't like a sound that sits comfortably in the genre.
Yeah.
I kind of do that, and that would glue a few of the bits together. And I think Adam could do that. Adam's got a few where his would bleed into that, you know what I mean?
And Jelly and also Alex, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And our good selves.
Yes.
Well, for instance, when I'm doing a night, just if it's, because a lot of the time when I'm doing events, I really like doing events, whatever it is, because I know that I've got a collective amount of people that know what they're doing and they know where they're going, so they know what the night's going to be about. But when I'm doing, like, say I do a whole night, like a 4-hour, 5-hour set, I'm not setting out what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go, right, well, I want to do this year and I want to kind of move into this era. So like last night, for instance, I did like Sister Funk stuff, bit of early 70s like stacks and good bit of funk, but just nothing too heavy at the start, because you want people warming up to you. You don't want to go ahead and start playing rare stuff that people don't know, because they might just get turned off instantly. But then you move into like a bit more of a funkier groove, but still keeping up with that like rare sound that people might not have heard before.
Might get a jail card on that. I like to play covers of stuff, so it could verge on being a daft cover of it, but I play an obscure, if someone says I like Stevie Wonder, Superstition, I'm not keen on that record, to be honest, but I'll play like an obscure cover of it, you know what I mean, and I feel better that way, and that's how I would engage people and not alienate them, you know what I mean.
Well, I remember the first night, going back to Soul Q, you DJ'd that, and you were on first, and you did a cover of Dr. John's Time by Ray J.
Yes,
and that just, I was like, wow,
it's heavier. It's
heavy, it's funky, but it's great. It's like that's the kind of stuff that just gets people kind of like gets their heads in gear, like.
Well, it's good if that's like even if it's a regular punter or someone else you DJ and then thinks, I know this song, what's this? And like then you're investigating, and that can build onto something else.
Yeah, builds rapport with people who.
I can get G thinking about another record. I've got something of that ilk, and it just snowballs from there. And that's, it can be organic on the dance floor with that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
But certainly from my experience of primarily go to sort of mod nights, is the best DJs I've come across are the ones who can mix R&B, Latin, hard soul, instrumentals. Yeah, and it's a real sort of eclectic mixture of just quality records, but the flow as well, and ultimately keep people on the dance floor. Yeah. And I think that's the secret, really.
I mean, I missed it, but you told me one of the best people you'd seen was, I wasn't at the Star and Shadow, was Bob Stanley.
Oh, yes, it's Pop Club. Yeah,
and he was just on too early.
Yeah,
he went from popcorn and he had a real...
Yeah, really fantastic array of records, yeah.
And that's what I would enjoy.
Just put on a little bit too early, yeah.
Is everyone here old school? I think I already know the answer, but...
old school?
Is everyone here old school opposed to bringing new technologies into your set? How has this impacted your set, your night?
Well, I've got to mention G. We had our friend James Gumbo, Ultimate Choice, up, and he had some what would you phrase them as? What was the terminology? Like sound effects and little jingles to plug his night.
And that was revolutionary. Yeah, because it was revolutionary from the concept that basically we're just 2 decks, mixer and vinyl. So him asking for like a CDJ was just like, whoa, what's going on here, kind of thing. But actually it did work because the sound effects.
I thought it was great. I thought it was great,
really good.
And I've only attributed, originally I would attribute it to like dancehall and reggae, and then hip hop and Westwood doing it, dare I say, atrociously. You know what I mean? Because like I wasn't a gasp. I was like, but it worked. Yeah. I think it was really good. You know what I mean? And I think that's about as forward thinking as we'd be, isn't it? Right?
And following that, a good friend Mick Clark, I very kindly asked him to put a CD together, just basically, of sound effects. Both influenced by that night that James, had the CD, but also just thinking back the times I've been to the Notting Hill Carnival and seen some of the sound systems and just some of the quirky noises that were sort of produced. And I thought, actually, do you know what it is? That would be really good at sort of fuzzy warbles on top of the visuals, on top of the excellent music. It's just to have sort of quirky sounds like sirens and car alarms and all that sort of stuff, just in amongst the sort of records, just to give it a little bit of
done well. It's a good tool, isn't it? Really, that's what it is.
Just to give it a bit of more dynamic. But regards your question, we are pretty much old school. We're vinyl, we're 2 decks, we're a mixer and a good sound system. And to be honest, the reason why is it
it's
does
a winning
the job.
formula. Yeah, it's like reinventing your wheel. You needn't do it, do you?
It does the job,
I'm very neophobic and don't move with new technologies and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And it stood the test of time, hasn't it? Yeah. Well pressed records from the 60s, good sound system, and it's universal, isn't it?
Keep it simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
Has your DJing style or approach changed since you all started playing records in front of an audience, for instance?
The approach has changed from doing the Tanners. Style, I wouldn't know. It wouldn't be for me to judge if I got a style. But yes, our approach has, because you're the focal point, which I wasn't really accustomed to till about 2 or 3 years ago. And you've got to keep an eye on what people are doing. You're there, I guess, to entertain, really, and keep them on the dance floor. So it's changed in that regard.
I don't think my style's changed, but I think my approach to buying records has changed a little bit, in the sense of, actually, I'm going to buy that record because that would be good for the dance floor, rather than previous, going back, over the last 20, 25 years. It was very much, really like that record, I'm going to buy it. And that could be across all sort of genres, whether it's a blues record, a rhythm and blues record, mod jazz record, rhythm and hard soul record, a modern soul record, or a disco record. So very much now it's kind of like, that would work on the dance floor, or it would work at the next Ernest. But then I've tried to like restrict myself from doing that, because then I'm kind of conscious I'm missing out on loads of good records that kind of I'd really appreciate at home. So not so much style, but maybe the way I approach buying records.
I mean, I've got a bit of a blunderbuss approach, and I've perhaps got too many records. So I've got some of these records, and
We'll all suffer from that, Craig.
well, I don't know if suffer's the right term. On the wrong day, you could be suffering. But yeah, I mean, some people just like going back to scenes and they'll focus on certain things like, you know, if you disco, you're just thinking about 12s. Nothing else, everything else is relevant. If it's more than northern, it's singles, where I'd play LP cuts, I'd play anything, you know what I mean?
I mean, when I first started DJing, I probably didn't collect original stuff because I was like very unaware, kind of like, you know, like as in when I was starting collecting, I was like, oh, I want that record because it sounds great. Oh, I want, you know, that because and if it's a record that's desirable, and I'm like, I'm never going to get it, so I'll just get the bootleg or the reissue. Then I totally changed my style because I decided, well, no, I'm going to listen to stuff that sounds good. And obviously, like I started DJing 3.5 years ago, and from then on, I've gotten into a total different style of music. So, like when I first started DJing, it was just Northern, and it was just that's all it was. And then I remember, you know, Neil Pounds. Yeah, he put a night on called Dirty Souls. He did it. He used to do it at the Telegraph, and then he did a couple of nights at the Town Wall. And the first one I went to was about 2 years ago at the Town Wall, and the music was just everything I want in a soul record or a funk record. Because I'd say my style is veered towards like funky soul, so stuff that's on like Curtin Records, bit of Stax, but also stuff that's a bit more rarer, a bit more like I'd say not incredibly rare that no one's ever heard it, but if you go into just a bar and you're hearing that music, you've probably never heard that before. So yeah, it's changed over time, and then obviously veering to more like modern stuff, so modern soul, and listening to like just great DJs from the 70s, who were around that time. So like I think he's they're Brian and David Pinchers. Yeah, those two have some of the most amazing collections I've seen. Anytime I'll search a record up, and they'll be top of the list. But yeah, any record that kind of like, I think, well, that'll sound good because it sounds like that. It was like what I was saying before. I was going like, that sounds like James Brown. That sounds like, you know, like it sounds like that's exactly why I want to go that way. And then that it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg for those records. No.
But you can work around that. It doesn't, you know, just because it's rare doesn't mean it's good. And the money thing, you can work, you know, like I had this conversation with G, and 20 quid max. There's a lot of records at 5 quid, but it's fantastic. I mean, yeah.
And I mean, just to sort of clarify that whole sort of approach to like original vinyl, I mean, what I tend to find is from, you know, being around people who've collected records over the last, you know, couple of decades, I tend to find people who focus on buying original records. They've just got a, you know, a really deeper understanding. They've got a much more of a breadth of record collection, rather than people who just simply focus on buying comps or reissues. And another thing is the whole concept of behind original records is that actually they don't have to be expensive. You know, you can get an original record for a couple of £2 and it's a fantastic record. And, I mean, and another key thing, sorry Craig, just to finish, another key thing is, you know, a lot of original records haven't been reissued yet. So there's a whole host of brilliant records out there that just haven't really seen the light of day, and are probably still sitting in warehouses, you know, either in this country or America, that are just waiting to be sort of played.
What was the process of choosing a venue for Byker Groove?
Well, as I was saying before, I mean, having sort of went to the New Star and Shadow for a number of electronic music nights, and just thinking, oh wow, what an absolute fantastic sound system, what an amazing space, and also shape and size. I just thought to myself, you know, it'd be really good to do an event in here. And for me personally, I think the Star and Shadow Cinema, I think it's probably the best sort of club space in Newcastle at the present moment.
It's got a good underground, sort of nearly anti-commercial tinge to it, which is refreshing when everything's a bit more.
Yeah, I mean,
like a SR44 in it.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you've got to respect, because you've got to respect the people who are involved, because it's all been sort of established by volunteers, you know, who've raised well over £1 million to set the new Star and Shadow Cinema up. So it's got a real sort of like grassroots community ethos.
By the people, for the people.
Yeah, and I know I'm conscious, it is a commercial venture in the fact it needs to be sustainable in order
paying
to pay bills and its mortgage, etc. But I just think the whole approach as well, it's really inclusive. You know, they're really quite welcoming of anyone who wants to do something within the venue. So yeah, so it's been an enjoyable experience working with the Star and Shadow. To put Byker Groove on. Has
the culture in Newcastle changed for the better or for the worse? What's your thoughts on this?
Newcastle is a cultural place, is a funny one. I mean, just for nightlife, I mean, it would hit things where it'd be number 9 in the world, up with Rio and places like that. And on the commercial end of it, which it's like stag do, you know what I mean? So you've got all of that, and there is some stuff here, and always has been, and I guess always will be. You've just got to look a bit harder, you know what I mean? And me and Giovanni discuss this, and sometimes grumble about it, but you can only really grumble if you're going to try and do something yourself and put your hat in the arena and try to make them changes you want, you know what I mean? And I think, without being negative, I would complain about a lot of it, but there is positive stuff, and there is stuff happening all the time. The use burn. I think the use burn is on the cusp of being oversaturated with
student housing.
I was going to say middle class tossers students. It was being harsh, but like, did they not say that Ousburn was one of the most desirable areas in Britain
to live?
Yeah. But what you've got the council selling money, and it's conflicting with them cultures like not the head of steam, it's the Tyne bar. They're now struggling. It's like a progress trap because people want to live there for the bohemian cultural sort of trappings, and they've moved near a pub, and they're going to complain about that. You know what I mean? And you find that at Ernest, don't you?
Yeah.
So there's, you know, there is a lot of stuff here. I would complain about a lot of stuff because I'm just that age where you do complain. You know what I mean? But I'm not one of them people where you want everything to be like when you were younger, growing up. You know, things change. You know what I mean? And you know, there is good stuff there, you know. You just got to be more decisive with what you want to do and see what's for you, you know.
Yeah. I think from my perspective, I think certainly the Ousburn is the sort of focus of how Newcastle has got better, and I think, you know, you've got to really take your hat off to bars such as Ernest, the Cobalt, which is another fantastic, you know, sort of club space, alternative space venue, and obviously the Star and Shadow, which is kind of primarily the sort of free sort of spaces I would sort of go to and engage with in Newcastle. Primarily because there's just opportunities to sort of do stuff there. You know, they're alternative spaces. However, within relation to the centre of Newcastle, it's not somewhere I would really drink, because it's kind of just not
Geordie Shore-esque, dare I say?
It's just not my cup of tea.
No, it's never been
my cup of tea at all. So I think it's very much Newcastle has got better, primarily because of what's happened in the Ousburn. However, I'm conscious potentially that may be under threat, what with the sort of gentrification, dare I say, of that part of the world. But yeah,
there's a couple of places in town that are actually really like interesting. So like I quite like Billy Bootleggers, for instance. That's really underground. Like, well, it is, because it is underground. But it's really like, you know, just kind of totally out there. No one really knows about it. I say a couple of workmates a couple of weeks ago, where do you want to go? And they were like, oh, we'll go to the Mushroom, or we'll go to anywhere on the Diamond Strip. And I'm just like, I'm not really feeling that. I don't want to pay in £10 to pay like 20 quid for a couple of drinks, and just not going to enjoy it. So I suggested, well, we'll go down to Billy Bootleggers and we'll have a good time. And instantly, I mean, it's not, I'm not going to say it's not cheap. It isn't cheap in there. It's not. But the vibe and the whole general crack of that place is wicked.
At the end of the night, 3 a.m, lights come on. How would you describe the event?
Wow, what just happened there? I'm dripping in sweat after dancing all night. and lots of people coming up and just giving really positive feedback. A room just full of happy people, content with what's just happened, sharing their experiences with one another, leaving in an orderly fashion because we'll probably have to do the tidying up. So from that perspective, I think that's the outcome. But I think from putting club nights on in the past, bumping into people years later, say for example on Northumberland Street, and saying, what is that night? It was a great backlash. It was a great milk the cow, and you're kind of like, you've totally forgotten the night, but then you're like, oh God, I remember that. So ideally, not only that situation at 3 o'clock in the morning when the lights come on, but also in the future, whether that's in a couple of weeks' time, a couple of months, couple of years, etc. So that would be the ideal sort of outcome.
Some people just take it for granted at the time, can't they? Then, years later you see them and go, I love that, and you go, wow, didn't get that impression at the time, you know what I mean? But no, from my experience at Ernest, it'll be some bird pissed looking for a baccy, won't it? That's the normal outcome. Have you seen me phone? Have you done this?
Don't put your drink on there.
Another key thing was regarding ticket price. I mean, ideally it would have been for free, but obviously there's costs in putting the night on, and we made a decision to keep the price really low, £5. Nice and simple, keep the cost low, try and attract as many people down as possible. I'm conscious next week I'm gonna be in Byker Community Centre for a work-related matter. I'm gonna put a poster up in there because, like I said, I just wanted to be as positive, as inclusive as possible to everyone within the area.
And I mean, that's why when you pitched it to me, this is probably about 3 months ago, maybe. And like I any night I do, I'm happy plugging it because I know for a fact anyone else that I do a night with, I know them personally, so I know what the crack is. I know how they work, and I know that it's gonna outcome to a very good night.
But also in reality, because I work in the centre of Newcastle, I'm always bumping into people on a lunchtime. The amount of people I've bumped into and like, Byker Groove, I'm going to come along. That sounds a really good event. Great. So really, really looking forward to it.
So, is the Fuzzy Warbles? I'm assuming it's a Clockwork Orange reference. Could you talk a little bit about who come up with the name?
It was my good friend Neil Sudders, aka Tyne, who came up with the identity, good name, and it is a Clockwork Orange reference when they're in the music shop and he's trying to chat up to two young. I can't remember the phraseology of what young Alex referred to women as, and he comes up with the line, "What do you listen to your Fuzzy Warbles on?"
Dvochkas.
Is that
young Dvochkas?
Young Dvochkas.
Is that? It is, isn't it? Young Dvochkas. Is that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
You'll have to rewatch the film.
Yeah. I look at the glossary in the back of the book because they've got a breakdown of all the phrases, haven't they?
Byker Groove Disco Party, Sunday the 26th of May, 9 till 3 at the Star and Shadow Cinema. Tickets are priced at £5 from Ticket Source. Please check out the Facebook event page entitled Byker Groove Disco Party. Yeah.